Species. Unite. I was at the restaurant, and it's like really the veil dropped in an instant. The curse broke, and I could see for the first time. Oh wow, I'm eating body parts, and I turned around and I saw my bag. And it was an expensive Fendi bag, and I looked at it. I'm like, this is not leather. This is the skin of an individual. This is a scam.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with Rebecca Cappelli. Rebecca is an award-winning filmmaker and an animal rights activist. Her most recent film is the documentary Slay, which explores the harms caused by fashion. What fashion does to the planet and what fashion does to its workers, which we've heard quite a bit about. But one thing that we haven't heard a lot about is what fashion does to the 2.5 billion animals that are killed for fur, leather, and wool. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for coming today. It's really nice to see you in New York, and it's really nice that we're doing this after last night's screening of your film Slay. Your film is beautiful is a weird word because it's hard, but there's something so beautiful about the way you tell these stories that it kind of stuck with me. I'm like, it's horrible, and it's a horrible industry, and all of these industries are just tragic and unnecessary, but it's so powerful, and I think that's where the beauty comes from, is how powerful that film is. And so thank you for putting it in the world.
Oh, well, and thank you for having me.
So I invited to the screening a bunch of my friends, and none of them are vegan that I invited. And I don't think I told anybody what it was. I just said it's a fashion film because a lot of people don't want to go see a vegan movie because they're afraid it's going to show them things they don't want to see. It's going to be horrible. They want to look away. And a few things. One, with your film, you actually don't show very much. It's not graphic.
It's not graphic.
But one of my friends who was sitting next to me, who's French, and she works in fashion, after the film, she had her hand on her head like this, and she looked at me and she said, I'm forever changed. This is why you invite the non-vegans.
Exactly.
Because this is the power of what you did. And so let's talk about it.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I have been focusing on reaching people who are not vegan, on reaching people who think they don't care about these issues, and breaking outside of echo chambers. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. It's you have to be really intentional, you have to be strategic, and you have to be able to keep that audience in mind. So I keep the audience in mind when I make the film. I know who I want to speak to. I want to speak to someone who loves fashion and maybe loves animals, or maybe not, but someone who has never thought about how animals, are affected by this immense industry. We're talking about 2.5 billion animals who are skinned for fashion every single year. It's a huge number. Of course, it is a smaller number when you look at the scale at which we hurt animals in the world, especially in the food system. But we're still talking about 2.5 billion individuals who are skinned, and they're completely greenwashed into oblivion. We don't talk about them. The industry doesn't want us to talk about them. We forget about them completely. That's why I wanted to make this film. And hearing that your friend had this reaction, this is the best reaction. And I do see, when I attend screenings myself, I do see people being changed.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's really powerful. I've been vegan for a long time, and I haven't worn animal products for a long time. And I'd seen the film before, so this was my second time. But one thing that hit me last night, seeing it a second time, even though I know this, but it just hit me in a different way, is like, absolutely none of this is necessary. This is all gratuitous. Like, there is not one thing we're doing in fashion with animals that is a necessity.
Yes.
And it's there's the absurdity of that. Like, how much life is just being slaughtered and tortured and over nonsense, really.
Well, nonsense, but also with the contrast of, we're talking about beauty here. We're talking about, aspiration, inspiration, being cool and style, and all the celebrities that are endorsing, any kind of thing. So fur, not so much right now, but, leather is still very, very big. This is, for me, it's really the contrast between the horrors that happen to the animals that I cannot even show in the film. I wanted to avoid the film to be graphic because we want people to watch. We want people to hear that story. And the making of leather is simply too barbaric to watch. It cannot be in a mainstream film. There's no slaughter, there's no skinning, and it's intentional because it will just traumatize people to the point where they will just be turned off and look away and not want to think about that again. And there are other avenues where people can access this kind of footage. There is social media, there's been investigation. So for someone who wants to deep dive, they can choose in their own terms. But to put someone in front of a film for an hour and a half, I cannot show this process. And so we have the contrast of these really horrible things happening for nothing. And then we say it's beautiful.
Right.
And then we say it's luxurious and it's the real deal and it's good for the planet and all that stuff that, these industries have been greenwashing about.
Well, and I think some of the magic in your film is all the fashion that you did use was like super high end, luxury, celebrity. This is what we're being sold every day, or we're supposed to aspire to, right? This is what we want. This is the desire. And going back and forth with that, and then you're on a fur farm, and going back and forth with like a fashion show. I think that's why it hit me so hard, the absurdity, because this is what we're being shoved down our throats, pretty much, that we should want, we should desire, without any real thought of what it's doing to animals and what it's doing to the workers in these industries and what it's doing to the planet, which none of the above are good.
Yeah, and what it's doing to us. Yeah. Because we are participants into practices that we don't agree with. And so a lot of the reason why I make films is because I believe people have a right to information. It's really important, crucial that people, have access to all this information and can make an informed decision. And only then you can have freedom of choice. And so that's why I do this. So it's doing this to the animals, to the planet, etc. But it's really doing something to us as well. And it's really destroying our values. It's making us accept so casually violence onto vulnerable beings and discarding the suffering of the humans who are also victims in the supply chains.
And we're taught, and it's just ingrained to like look away. None of that stuff exists in the bubble that we're kind of given to, and it's hard to break out of. Because I think another really wonderful thing about your film is that you use yourself and your story throughout, and that there was a time that you wore fur. There was a time that you had a lot of leather and a lot of luxury fashion. But so to use yourself, because there's very few people who are vegan or don't wear this stuff anymore who didn't at one time participate. And right. None of them were bad people. It's just we didn't know. Like, and even if you say, well, of course you knew your bag came from a cow, but we kind of didn't. Like, it didn't. We didn't. And so, will you talk about that? Like, how this happened to you personally? Like the unveiling.
I really think that it's my dog that opened me to animal individuality. So, I was living in Shanghai, and at that time, actually, I wanted to get a puppy, and I started to look for buying a puppy. And I went online and I saw all these articles how buying a puppy is bad and, you should adopt instead. And I was like, sure. And I landed on this adoption website and I saw his picture and I knew this was it. Love of my life, soulmate, like this is it. And I adopted him. And so his story was he had been born on a construction site, and the migrant workers, it was on the suburbs of Shanghai, they had a bunch of dogs, including him. And, there was this Chinese lady on her way to work. Every day she was crossing the sites and seeing these puppies. And one day she asked, what are you going to do? What are you doing with all these dogs? And they said, well, they're guarding the site now, but we're going to eat them in the winter. And she felt completely horrified. So she bought the dogs from the workers. I think it was 6 of them for the equivalent of $40. And they all got adopted except this one because he was supposedly too big. He's only 20 kilos. He's a medium-sized dog, but, anyways, nobody wanted him because he was meant to be with me.
Right.
And so anyways, so this guy has a huge personality. They all do, of course, but some individuals are really, really unique with their quirks and everything. He's extremely smart. We communicate almost on a telepathic level. We have really like this relationship where it's effortless and we understand each other. And so that really got me thinking, wow, this individual was going to be eaten. And they explained to me, and the fur would be sold also on the black market as fur. And I thought, how barbaric. And what happened, it was actually complete awakening one day where it was a story about a dog that had been severely abused, and that shocked me into consciousness. And I decided on that moment, I have to be conscious. I cannot be someone who creates suffering because I am mindlessly doing something, or I want to do things out of convenience. So I decided I want to be someone who does good intentionally and who removes myself from doing any kind of bad things unintentionally. And I was at the restaurant, and it's like really the veil dropped in an instant. The curse broke, and I could see for the first time, oh wow, I'm eating body parts. And I turned around and I saw my bag, and it was an expensive Fendi bag, and I looked at it and I'm like, this is not leather. This is the skin of an individual. This is a scam. I've been scammed. I've been lied to. And so all that happened instantly. So it was really, really shocking to me to realize that. And then, it's all around you. It's in my wardrobe. And then I realized I've been wearing fur, thinking it's there. You see the product and it's like, oh, it's there. They're already dead, so I might as well wear it. I might as well make use of it. Not thinking, supply, demand, you buy, they die, So it was very ignorant, but it was the path, that I was on. I was in a life where it was very much about career, very much about just thinking about yourself, a bit self-centered and all of that. So yeah, that changed my life entirely, really. And that came from, again, my dog. My dog is my greatest teacher.
When I went vegan, I knew about the dog meat trade. I knew about it, but I didn't think about it. And then I'd been spending a lot of time in Asia, and I got closer and closer to it. And then I was back in New York. I had a moment and I was like, I was vegetarian too, and an animal lover for decades. And I had this moment and I was like, oh my God, how do I still contribute to all of these systems? And I had kind of a crazy moment too, in the sense of I went vegan in a minute. And never thought about it again. And I also, within the 2 days, got rid of every single piece of leather, suede, any animal product I owned was either given away, sold, gone. And I was down to running shoes, very little, nothing.
Yeah. Similar journey. I mean, some of us, when we open our eyes, we just cannot close them again, cannot turn a blind eye. And we just have to rearrange our lives around that. Yeah. And that's the shift. And what's beautiful about the shift is not that you become someone else, you become finally who you are.
Yeah.
And that's really empowering. It's very painful as well, of course, when you first realize all that. But then you take a stand and you just do. Your action finally align with who you are at your core. And that's beautiful.
Melanie Joy is in your film to talk about the psychology of all of this. And I've had her on the podcast before. And when she was on the podcast, I was like, why did it take me so long? I was an animal lover. I was like really like sad and perplexed and confused about it. And she was like, that is how strong conditioning is. That's cognitive dissonance. And most people, a great majority of people, never have moments like what we had, no matter how many seeds are planted. And I think one of the only things we can do, and you planted a really big seed, is plant seeds for other people, because it's really hard to hit anyone on the head with it and say, you have to change. Because we know, as two people who really loved animals, what it takes. Like it takes a lot of seeds, and it takes really big moments.
Yes. And so one of my initial intention why I chose to make films is because it is scalable. I can go to bed and someone somewhere is watching it. So I love that. And people, they have an hour and a half, and they just listen to something, take on new data, they reconnect with their emotional intelligence, and then they can decide for themselves.
Let's talk about the film. You're all over the world in this film, right? How many countries were you in?
We shot in 7 countries.
And you uncover a lot of lies. I mean, there's a lot of like subtle lies that we tell ourselves and are told, but there's also a lot of like blatant being lied to.
Yeah.
Like leather in Italy. I had no idea. Will you talk about that?
So Slay is 3.5 years of work from first day of shoot to release, and it snowballed. In the beginning, I thought very naively, I'm going to make this film in 18 months or 2 years, and it will be easy. But what happened was, because we were I decided to make the film, and a month later it was Fashion Week in Europe, and we had to start shooting because it was winter and people were going to wear more leather and fur and all of that. So we started shooting, and we started shooting without a script. So Slay is completely unscripted. So we started shooting, and as we were shooting, I was making research. And what I realized is that it's actually a complex topic. The supply chain issues are complex, and I didn't know anything about it, to be honest. So I had some ideas and some hints about, okay, it cannot be good. And I want to focus on fur, leather, and wool because these are the big ones. But it really snowballed. It really snowballed because as I was doing research, I realized, well, you can't talk about the fur industry without going to China and talking about China. You can't talk about leather without mentioning deforestation in Brazil. You can't, talk about fur even without talking about trapping and wool. It has to be in Australia. So yeah, it did snowball. We ended up going to a lot of places. And then we had this immense amount of footage and data, and we had to really choose best of best, and really pick from the most relevant information.
Clearly, you were learning a lot as you went. A lot of things were getting unveiled as you dug deeper. The scene in China when you're looking at all the furs and there's wolf fur. The wolf fur. I don't know why that one got me too. I mean, it's all bad, but it just never occurred to me that people are wearing wolves. But of course they are. They're wearing everything. The dog and cat fur. It's all coming here. So it's in the collars and it's in the pom-poms on your hat. And why does it matter if it's a fox or a wolf or a dog or a cat? It's all the same thing.
Yeah, but it makes a point to show that no animal is safe. No animal is safe from fashion, actually. No animal is safe from humans. No. But in this industry, again, seeing a rabbit keyring that is made of real rabbit fur and it costs $1.50. And then you see them, on markets all over the world.
Yeah.
That is really the absurdity of the whole thing.
We're told a lot of myths. And so go back to leather for a minute. One myth is high-end luxury leather comes from Italy, usually, and everything's sourced there, made there. That's kind of the impression everybody gets. And it's not tanned in the way that leather's tanned in India or Bangladesh with all the chemicals and killing people. That's the myth that we buy into. But what's really happening in Italy?
So when we say made in Italy or made in France, this does not mean that the whole garment or the whole product was made in that country. Sometimes it's just designed there, or at the end there's just a little bit of glitter or the last little button or logo. The rules are really loose enough to allow the final product to be called made in Italy, for instance. And what happens in the leather industry is that the skins can really come from all over the world. Biggest leather producing countries are China, India, Brazil as well. But even USA as well produces a lot of leather. And so these skins then get shipped all over the world. And so what happens is that the tanning process, typically skins are tanned with chromium, and it's a toxic chemical. And it's much easier and cheaper, and you have higher margin when it's done in a country that has really poor environmental laws and no protection for the workers. And so, yeah, you have these skins that are pre-tanned, sometimes finished, but most of the time pre-tanned, and they, produce sometimes even child labor or people who have really no protection. And then it's shipped all over the world, including to Italy. And I would have to say that I think that brands and fashion professionals don't truly understand that, but they have no excuse, because if I have uncovered what I have uncovered, just, me and my cinematographer going around and asking the right question to the right people, but, the brands have no excuse to not know what's happening in their supply chain. And so there's a lack of transparency, and nobody is asking about that. Nobody is questioning that. So what happens in Italy is we actually looked very closely at this small town that is between Florence and Pisa, that is really a center for tanneries that are in the supply chain of luxury brands. And so what happens in this part is that most of the workers in the tanning sector are people who are more vulnerable. And in Italy, the hardest part of the work of tanning, of, lifting these very heavy skins that are soaked in chemicals and putting them in these big drums, but also putting them through steam rolling machines and all of that. This is heavy work. This is dangerous work. This is dirty work as well. And this is done by immigrants. But when I say immigrants, they are legally in the country. Some of them, the people that I have spoken to, they've been in Italy for several decades, and they speak Italian. And they are, again, legally in Italy. Yet, these people are still exposed to all of these risks for cancer because of the chemicals, all the risk of the machines that are really, really dangerous machines. So, people get wounded very, very often.
And lose fingers a lot too.
Yeah, fingers and all of that. I mean, you can imagine that if you're working this job the whole day and you're lifting and it's hard and it's in this environment with the noise and everything, at some point, yes, maybe you may be a bit less cautious and hypervigilant. And these machines, again, are like, they are there to, completely make the skin so flat and, process them with the chemicals and all of that. So you don't have time. Plus they have the pressure of the volume.
Right.
So there's no time for them to really, sometimes, I mean, I don't want to make generalities. I'm sure there are some of the tanneries that, especially at the most finishing step, it will be better than at the pre-tanning step. But still, so these people are discriminated against because they do the really difficult work, the dangerous work. They don't get promoted. What I was told is that the immigrants don't get promoted. It's usually the Italians, and they come here 3 months and they would have access to benefits that someone who is from another cultural background or another country would take years and years and years to maybe have that promotion, even if they are doing a good job. And they also have a lot of issues with contracts. So a lot of them are on weekly contracts that are renewed weeks after weeks after weeks. And so in that context, you cannot, settle. You cannot really even buy a house or get a loan or, I don't know. It's very, very hard to care for your family and your kids and see a future for yourself in these conditions. And one really sad thing is we shot that part before COVID. COVID hit. Most of them, they got left without anything,
Yeah.
no salary, no job. And there are people who are really willing, like it's hard and dangerous, but they still want to work.
Right.
And they were really left behind. And it was really, really tough. It must have been really, really difficult.
It's terrible in any industry when workers are treated like that and paid like that and working 13-hour days and hard labor. But in an industry where people are making billions of dollars, like billions and billions of dollars, all these high-end luxury fashion brands.
So the big brands will have, some agreements with their supplier, and that they hide behind that. They say, oh, you have to treat the workers like this and like that and pay them. But then supply chain is, they're just not transparent. And then it trickles down and outsourced to another supplier who outsourced to another supplier. And in the end, they don't know, they don't do the checks, and they don't care. They just don't care, If it's not broken, don't fix it. For them, from their standpoint of, creating profits, making profits, it's not broken for them. So they just keep going and they push for more consumption.
And when you were in India inside the tanneries too, I mean, that's devastating, that footage, to see what workers were living with and doing, and the diseases on their skins and the cancers, and there's kids, and that leather ends up all over the world too. I mean, that's not like, oh, that's the really bad leather. It's the same stuff, right?
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to go to Italy as well, because it's not, obviously, I mean, the point is not to say, look at India, how dirty, how bad, without addressing what is happening in Europe, for instance, or in the US or these Western countries. What was really hard for me in India was I didn't know how the local communities were affected by that. They have nothing to do with leather. They don't have a job in the leather industry, but because of the wastewater from tanneries that is not properly treated, that ends up in irrigation systems, ends up in the farmlands, you have farmers, like entire communities where people become crippled because they're working the soil, but the soil is contaminated and they get this disease. And so what happened, this family that we spoke to, 4 kids, the father got crippled, his hand got crippled because of the chemicals in the farmland. And they're all relying now on the woman, on the mother. And she makes barely $50 a month. And she was saying, we can't educate the kids. Even the rickshaw can educate their kids and we can't. And so it's keeping people in vicious cycles of poverty and suffering. You can't even make it the next generation.
No.
You can't be educated. You can't have a chance. And it's absolutely terrible that we have these systems in place where these poor innocent people are really paying. They are at the mercy of our consumption ways, and they are not discussed because, there's a huge amount of attention on fast fashion and how bad it is for the planet. And it is very much deserving of the criticism, and it should be stopped. It shouldn't be that any business can be created and sell as much as they want or produce as much as they want. It's completely insane to me that there's no regulation around that. But we talk about that, and we talk about garment workers, but the workers in the supply chain of leather, they are completely erased from the conversation, because if you talk about the workers and the communities affected by leather, you have to talk about leather, you have to talk about skins, you have to talk about animals, and it's another Pandora box. In Slay, I focus a lot on luxury brands, and it's not to discard the harms of high fashion and fast fashion. It's because these brands have no excuse. They have the means, they have the people, they have the talent to do things better. And that's also what is the promise they make to a customer. When someone buys something from luxury, we assume that it's going to be made correctly, properly, with respect. But no, actually, it's just the craftsmanship and the technique. And so, these people are left behind.
Yeah. And not to mention, of course, all of the animals that are in the leather industry.
Oh, yes. The animals are completely just not mentioned. It's not a thing. And it's crazy. So Joshua Catcher has a really good line in the film. And he says, one thing that the leather and fur industry has been really good at the past few years is take a debate about the animals and turn it debate about plastic when it comes to material. And you see that on the conversation in social media or in general. The minute you mention animals is yes, but plastic.
Right.
As if there's only these two things and you have to hurt animals, or you don't even, I mean, for me, like placing the suffering of an individual to on the same level of using plastic is crazy to me, because also sadly we do live in a plastic world. Don't tell me that all these people who are saying vegan leather is plastic. I mean, they have plastic bags, they have I don't know, plastic container. There's plastic everywhere.
And also most leather, any leather in a car seat is treated with gobs of plastic.
Yes.
Like there's a ton of plastic in leather.
Yes.
And so it's like such a stupid conversation. And like
it is.
Yes, we're trying to get away from plastic, and some materials people are doing it already, and they're making incredible materials, but we're on our way there, right?
Yes.
And so it makes zero sense. And one thing you said last night that we'll get into the fur, but I never thought about this in my life, was when the fur industry really went after the faux fur industry, and same thing, plastic, and all the microplastics that are going to go into the water. And you're like, who washes a faux fur? And I thought that was so, it's true. I have a lot of faux furs. I don't wash any of them.
We don't even think about it.
No.
I mean, because we are so manipulated by this conversation saying, faux fur is polluting the oceans. Actually, I mean, obviously we want to have a plastic-free world. That would be fantastic. That's what we should aim for. But no, we don't wash our faux fur garment. No. We don't wash it in washing machines. It's not
going
leaking
in the water.
Microparticles and all of that. And yeah, I don't know. You know, it's like, it's not the criticism against faux fur and the criticism against any vegan alternative is that you have to be perfect and pure. You are held to such different standards. And then even when you are, we are at the point where now it's, okay, yes, but it's more expensive. Oh, yes, but it's not available. Oh, yes, but, you know, let's support, I don't know, leather workers, or we already eating animals, so we might as well make use of it.
Well, and well, you hit on that fact too, the byproduct thing about leather. So for people who don't know, that leather is not a byproduct of meat.
It's a co-product. So most leather that is produced, it comes from hides that, yes, do represent a small percentage in terms of the value of the animal. But the meat industry being an industry with very small margins and big scale, the leather components, the profits from leather is enabling the meat industry to continue. And so a lot of the things that I explain to people when that conversation arises is, it doesn't matter if the skin is even a waste product. It's not, but it's a byproduct of it's a co-product of another violent and unsustainable industry.
Right.
And you cannot say that leather is not violent. It's very violent.
Yeah. It's very violent. And you're wearing violence. Like there's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're wearing violence, and in a deceiving way.
Yeah. Without really knowing it.
Without really knowing it, and for those who know it, it's very pervert. I mean, it's not. It's really a strange world, and so that's one thing as well. We talk about artificial intelligence. We send people to space, and we're walking around wearing skins like the Middle Ages.
Right.
That's so strange to me.
And there will be a time where people will look back and say, like, oh my God, people carried bags made of skin. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's gross and it's horrifying.
It is.
And if that will happen, I mean, we will be there with leather's probably going to be the first, I think, big transition that vegan materials take over because of the environment, because the stuff being made now is so beautiful and it works better.
Exactly. And technology is only going to get better and better, whereas the poor animals, that's it. That's who they are. And leather is not going to improve.
Yeah.
You know, the skin trade is not going to improve.
Right.
So, but the technology is going to improve. Innovation is going to improve.
To get better
and then we're going to get like really amazing stuff. So it's a matter of time.
And they'll go down.
Yes.
So fur kind of has gone, I mean, it's gone way down in certain ways. Like in the US, you don't really see people walking around in fur coats. Mm-hmm. You don't see it in most Western places anymore, especially cities.
You see it in Milan in winter.
Okay.
And you see it. So one thing that was shocking to me is when we were shooting Slay, we're shooting some footage and B-roll. And so we're doing a lot of street stuff and looking for people who have a fur trim and, all of that. And we could find those. But since Slay was released, I think it was last winter, I was in London and Milan around the same time. I've seen more fur than before.
That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah.
Stephanie Downs, who was on the panel with you last night, she told me not too long ago, she said, no, fur's coming back. Like, you're starting to see it. Celebrities are wearing it again.
Yeah.
Which is like absolutely horrifying.
For me, as long as there's still animal in cages, it's not over. So it will be over when there are no more fur farms.
Right. It's not dead.
It's not dead until it's dead. So of course there's been a lot of progress, and there's a lot of organizations. All the organizations have been doing like really tremendous job with treasure campaigns and education and all of that. But it's still there. Now what I see is more like mid-range and cheap garment with real fur. And I can tell, it's a lot of raccoon dog.
Even though a lot of brands have now committed to being fur-free, and even if they're not today, they will be in 2024, or there's dates coming for a lot. There's still a lot that won't budge.
And the number one being LVMH Group.
Yeah.
So they own Dior, Fendi. Fendi is originally a furrier, so their roots is in fur, and they still use a lot of fur in all of their collections. And actually, the fur industry loves to share pictures of catwalk from Fendi, because they say, "Look how beautiful." Fendi, they really hide behind Fendi. But Dior as well, Louis Vuitton, and LVMH actually also owns crocodile farms in Australia. So factory farms for exotic skins. And they use everything, and they are very, very deceitful in their communication, because they say that they get the fur from, certifications, good standard, like welfare, fur mark, all that stuff. That's their farms, or the crocodile farms follow and are audited by their crocodilian standards. And all of these standards are really, really unwatchable how these products, how the skins are obtained. So it is a problem. And LVMH is also more of a problem because the CEO Bernard Arnault is actually the wealthiest man in the world. The wealthiest man in the world is not the CEO of Google or Amazon or anything. It is the owner of LVMH. His son, Antoine Arnault, is the CEO of Berluti, a shoe brand. And earlier this year at the Global Fashion Agenda, he had a keynote, and he said to everyone, in front of everyone, trying to make it sound like it was good and it was green, but he said he was very proud to say that he likes it when skins have scars, because it meant that the animal has actually lived. And that's someone who gets a keynote at the Global Fashion Agenda saying that in front of everyone, thinking that he's so good because he's not throwing away the skin because there's a scar. And it's just a profit-driven decision too. Of course. Of course. So it's just like, oh, instead of throwing all these skins because there's a mark, now we're going to say that it's the patina and all of that. It's so barbaric. It was so violent to hear that. I was really, really shocked. And so LVMH is really, really digging their heels in the past and really, really outdated idea of fashion.
Where were you with the woman who talking about fur and the animals? Where was that? It's not funny, but that's definitely the funniest part of the whole movie.
Yes. So I used the cover story and I used the cover name because I already had done a short film. And if you look me up, you would know where I stand on these issues. So I used the cover story and to approach her. She was at that time the CEO of Fur Europe, which is really an interest group that is promoting fur in the political context. And she's a lobbyist. And
what was your cover story?
Well, that we wanted to record a video on how, slow fashion and fur is sustainable. And so we went in to talk about these things, which we talked at length about, but it was, again, there's no real foundations to all their claims. And at some point I wanted her to talk about the animals. I think the question was something like, so what would you say to someone who has an issue with animal welfare and fur?
Right.
And then, you'd be surprised. People really download a lot of information. They'd love to talk. And I was really surprised.
Watching her say that, oh no, the animals, like their lives are great and they're very curious. These are animals in barren wire, like all sides. Mm-hmm. And that's their entire life until they're electrocuted and killed. And even the way she talks about how they're electrocuted.
Yeah.
Which, when they're electrocuted, they have one side goes in their mouth, the other side goes inside their rectum. And they're electrocuted, like double electrocuted.
Yes.
And she talks about how humane that is.
It's someone who lies for a living. Some people do that. Some lobbyists do that. And that's what they do. They lie for a living and they convince themselves, or they try to convince others that they are saying the truth. I mean, it's mind-blowing to see that.
That was like astonishing. Like, that was crazy.
I know.
It was really crazy.
I know.
It's a great scene. I mean, it's like, you just really get it, like what you're up against, what we're up against. Yeah. The first time I saw the film, I saw it on my TV. And last night I saw it in the theater. It was a totally different experience to see it on a big screen. And one of the differences to me, which I definitely had this experience the first time, but it was much greater seeing it in the theater, was when you're on the fur farm and you're focusing on individual foxes. It reminds you of your dog. It reminded me of my dog. She kind of looks like a fox. And the way they're running around, they're kind of like want your attention. And their lives are so desperate in these little crappy wire cages. And that's all they do all day, is just sit in the wire cage for their entire life. And you think about, I saw a fox last week upstate, of like their lives in the forest and all the adventures and the curiosity and the running and the families and the mate and the babies, and like what a full life for a fox.
Yeah.
And then this.
It's heartbreaking. And I think, foxes also have a very, very strong look in their eyes and very, very strong gaze. And so when you are on the fur farm, what you see individuals right away. And it's really important that we reconnect these big numbers that are so ridiculous that it's hard for us to make an emotional connection to, when we talk about 100 million foxes that are killed for fur, what does it mean? But when we really sit with one individual looking at us, not understanding what is happening, I mean, if they knew, right. What you see on fur farms, you see individuality, and you see some foxes are scared of people. Some foxes are playful. They want to play. They're bored to death. And they're also very young. The foxes are killed around 9 months old. So they are, still very, very young animals. They want to engage and, they want to have some stimulation. And then you have a huge bunch that just hate us. And to stand there as someone who would never hurt them, but to see how much they hate humans, it's very confronting. Who can blame them?
And those are probably the smart ones, right? Because they know.
Exactly. And so the industry says that it's okay. They've been bred in captivity for generations, and so they're not wild. They are totally wild. They are wild animals.
Just watching that part and all the up closes of the eyes and the faces, I think that might be the hardest part to watch for me. Even though there was no violence, you were just looking at fox faces. And that's when it hit me again last night of like, all of this is for nothing.
Yeah.
It's for nothing. And it's 100 and something million animals for fur every year. Right. And for nothing.
How can this be allowed?
Who are we? And you do start saying to yourself, like, who do you want to be in the world? Mm-hmm. Right? Like someone who contributes to that.
It's unfathomable. And again, the public is misled into consuming these products. I would have never in a million years touched any of that if I had had the right information.
Right. Same.
And so that's why I think information education is so important.
So you hit the big three: wool, fur, and leather. And wool is the one people say to me all the time, I don't understand why you don't wear wool, Beth. Mm-hmm. Like it's, yes. It's not that bad. It's just a sheep. Their hair grows anyway. And all the kind of myths about wool.
Yes.
So will you talk about why they're myths?
Yes, of course. So So wool, we don't see the harm because we have bred sheep to a point where they produce an unnatural amount of wool and they need to be sheared. And so it would be cruel to not shear them. But again, they are like this way, not by, not as nature intended. So the problem with wool is it's really, really deceitful industry. And the things I think that some people are aware of is the mulesing. So you have this practice that is very standard in Australia where they just slice off the skin around the bum area, the behind of the sheep. And so to do that at scale and cost efficient way and all of that, this is done without painkillers. So they really cut the tails, cut the behind. And so you have, there's been a lot of campaigns and there's still some ongoing campaigns to ban that completely. And some brands are using, wool that's from the Responsible Wool Standards, RWS. And these standards guarantee that there's no mulesing and that the animals are also not sent on live exports. And so this is really, really reassuring to the consumer and to people because people want to make good choices when they learn about these things. But the Responsible Wool Standards also don't cover the fact that once the wool quality decreases for the sheep, they are sent to slaughter. They're sent to slaughter. So it is a slaughter industry. It is hand in hand with slaughter. So again, there's so much happening. And plus, in addition, you also have the issue of winter lambing because when you look at, again, these big industries, lots of pressure, the farmers are under a lot of pressure to produce more and more wool. And they are under that pressure because of organizations such as Woolmark that are promoting wool. And again, in this capitalist system where it's always about consuming more, producing more. And so you have 70 million sheep in Australia, which is a huge number. All this land should be reforested, rewilded and returned to also in indigenous communities, some of them for sure. And so what the farmers came up with was to make the mother sheep have their babies in the winter. This way, when the lambs start to grow, they are going to feed on more grass. It's going to be more lush and green in spring. And so that is less costly for the feed. Whereas if they are born in spring, which is, again, as nature designed, babies are born in spring and, temperatures are better and all of that. But also when they reach, when they grow, then it will be summer. It's more dry. Then you have to supplement the feed. And so that has a cost. And so this practice of winter lambing plus combined with the fact that sheep have been selectively bred to have more twins and triplets. Usually sheep are supposed to have as many twins and triplets naturally as humans.
So not that many.
Not that many, exactly. And so that combined with the winter lambing, you have a lot of mother ewes that actually die giving birth or cannot, care for their young, or they have some babies that are too weak to keep up. And so you have this huge, huge collateral damage of millions and millions of lambs in Australia that just die as in the first 48 hours after being born. A newborn lamb cannot regulate their own temperature. They need to be with their mother. And one thing that was really heartbreaking, we didn't put in the film because of the pace of the storytelling and everything, but you find a lot of these dead lambs around trees because it's slightly warmer because of the roots.
Oh,
it's so heartbreaking.
So sad.
And so you go closer to trees and you see these little bodies that are lifeless and that tried to find a little bit of warmth just from the roots of the tree.
That's just like a collateral damage of the industry.
Exactly. Dead lambs everywhere. And so you have rescuers, and that's what we did. We followed someone who every winter, and she gets up in the middle of the night and she goes and crosses the fence because she knows that there are these lambs that are dying and nobody's going to rescue them. Talking about huge, flocks, thousands of animals. They don't receive individual care, and they're not in barns sheltered or anything like that. It's just out in the open, and these babies are just dying. And so she does that. And she's not the only one, but there are some people, and a lot of them are women.
Yeah,
and
of
course. And they go out and they rescue babies and they nurture them back to health. And it's very difficult work because a lot of them don't survive. They didn't receive the colostrum from the mother. They got too sick too quickly, too cold too quickly, and they don't have the love from the mother. They don't have, that bond.
Yeah.
So it's really scary to see that this is just a practice that is really being downplayed by the industry as well.
I thought I knew most bad things that happen. I didn't know about it. Yeah.
Yes. And I didn't know either before we went to Australia.
Wow. It's the same thing. We don't need it. Like,
we don't. And so if you really want to have a conversation about what is sustainable and responsible, just recycle existing wool. If you really want to use wool, just use recycled wool. There's so much that is already produced that's going to landfill or that is mixed with, different fibers as well and synthetics as well. Like fashion needs to get it together.
Fashion needs to dramatically change, but so do regulations. Like the fact that fashion has so few limits put on it on any direction.
On anything.
Yeah. Is absurd.
Completely. They get a pass on everything. It's not the only industry. I mean, the animal agriculture also gets a huge pass on everything.
And we have really good solutions and alternatives and more and better coming. But not once since I've been vegan have I been like, oh, I wish I had that leather coat. You don't need it.
You don't.
You don't know it until you know it, that you don't need it.
No, exactly. And there's this silly thing as well where I think last year I was trying to buy a pair of vegan boots and not from a vegan brand. And they came and I realized the sole is leather. Like the whole boot is vegan. The sole is leather. I had to return it. I had to explain to them, to write to them and to say, why are you doing that?
One reason that happens is because that happens a lot with shoes here. You're like, oh, wow, they're vegan. And it'll be a non-vegan brand. And then you say, oh, the sole's leather. Is because it's cheaper for import taxes if it's leather than if it's not leather.
Yeah.
The leather gets a deal. Like that should be immediately changed.
There you go. That should be immediately changed.
And so people put a leather sole in on purpose for the price cut. And it's right now, how can people see it?
So Slay is available for free on the eco-streaming platform Waterbear. You can find the link via social media on Instagram. It's at slay.film and we have that. It is available on iTunes as well. And it is going to be available soon on Prime Video. I don't have a date yet, but I hope. Yes, I'm really happy about that. And we're just making sure that, it is widely available and people can watch it.
And everybody should watch it.
And it's not graphic. It is uncomfortable, of course. It is a tough topic, but at the same time, it is not graphic.
Rebecca, thank you for making this film. No one had done this. No one really addressed the animals in fashion.
At the root of it, we are having a crisis of ethics. We casually condone violence on so many levels. We condone oppression and exploitation of people, of the planet, of life, as long as we assault life that is embodied as animal or embodied as a river or a forest or as someone else, we will have a crisis. Yeah. And so it's really important for me to talk about what we are doing to animals independently from the climate conversation. Even if it was okay for the planet,
this still isn't okay.
This still isn't okay. That's the conversation we need to be having. And it is uncomfortable, but we need to have it and we need to stop it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
To learn more about Rebecca and to watch Slay, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like to support the podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it. Please go to our website, speciesunite.com, and click donate. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knutson, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke, Ayanna Peoples, Olivia Deming, and Anna Kollner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.